talk to your friends. Talk to all your relatives, talk to your neighbors, talk to your closest friends, talk to those that are in civic clubs with you, they go to church or synagogue with you, wherever it might be. Go talk to your friends because everyone has to get a vote. This is going to be one of the most closest elections we've ever faced in our nation. And if we lose by 1,000 votes, it's not going to be good. So next Tuesday, when we go vote, let's send a signal to the nation that we, the people, say that America is not for sale. And we're going to make America great again with President Donald Trump. That would have made a great president. We are so fortunate to have Dr. Carson and his wonderful wife, Candy.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Candy and I are delighted to be back in Nevada. And isn't it wonderful to know that we do have some governors in our country like Governor Thaler?
Woo! Yes!
And more importantly, you know, there's been a lot of movement in recent years, women's rights, and how wonderful it would be to have the first woman president. But,
Not yet.
would it be good to have the first woman president who's a criminal and gets put in jail? No! I don't think so. When we have people like General Fallon.
Okay. Maybe later on.
And other amazing people throughout the country. I think that's the direction we need to go. But, you know, right now, I just want to thank everybody for coming early on a Saturday morning.
Our pleasure.
And thank you for those who volunteered, who are knocking on doors, who are making phone calls.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the important thing is that what you are doing is for our children. And for our grandchildren, for all the progeny who are coming after us. And it's the very same thing that the Patriots did in the beginning.
That's right.
Who were willing to give up everything, including their lives, so that we could have a land that is free.
Yes.
It's one of the reasons that I personally fight so strenuously against those who want to take our freedoms away. And one of the classical ways they want to take them away is with political correctness.
Yeah.
You know that? Telling you what you can say, what you can't say, what you can do, how you need to act. You know what? There are people who gave their lives so that we could have those freedoms.
That's right.
And they would turn over in their graves if they knew that we were submitting to the secular progressive tool of political correctness, which is only there to keep us from talking while they fundamentally change the underpinnings of our society.
That's right.
And we should not allow it to happen. We are so incredibly fortunate to live in a country like this. However, do you ever stop and think how close we are to losing what we have?
Yes.
I mean, it is a lot closer than anybody thinks. And this whole election process should have been about the fundamental changing of America versus what our ancestors fought for.
Yes.
And it should be about the values and principles that made America great. It should be about the direction that leads to a country that is up for and by the people versus the direction of a country that will be of, for, and by the government. But the political elites and the media, they know that if you make it about those issues, it will be a landslide because the American people will choose the things that made us great. Therefore, they have done everything they can to divert attention away from what this election is really about. And it is kind of silly. I mean, they want to talk about something that a billionaire playboy said 15 years ago.
Like we care.
Versus something that a previous Secretary of State did that endangers our country.
Yes.
And to make those things equivalent?
No.
I mean, that is so absurd.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is, what we have to remember is that it's not about Donald Trump. It's not about Hillary Clinton. It's about America and the direction that we are going to take. You know, the left gets kind of irritated with me when I'm on one of their shows on television. And I keep pushing that, and they want to come back. Yeah, but didn't he say this? I said, look, you guys, just through your thick skull.
And you would know.
But the good thing is that our system was designed in such a way that we, the people, when we saw that we were going in the wrong direction, we could take corrective action. Now, that requires courage. The reason it requires courage is because when you say that you're going to, for instance, stand with Trump, they say you're racist, you're a homophobe, you're Islamophobic, you hate your mama. I mean, they throw everything at you, including the kitchen sink. And for that reason, a lot of people are reluctant. But you know what? I think on Tuesday there's going to be a giant surprise. Because the American people are a lot smarter than the political class and the media make them. And they're not going to be manipulated like little marionette puppets. Okay, pulling the strings and telling them what they're supposed to think. Now, some of them will. Okay, now some will. Okay, but the majority of Americans are smarter than that, and will actually be able to think for themselves and recognize that this election is not about Democrats and Republicans. This election is about the political class and their media minions and we the people. That's what it's about. And recognize what's at stake. You know, the governor laid it out, but they have been working, the progressives, really since the time of Woodrow Wilson, on a fundamental change in America. They want to change us from what we are because they think they have a better vision. Their utopian society where no one has to worry about anything from cradle to grave. The government will take care of everything. And they'll take care of you all right. It is fair. And all of those societies end up looking exactly the same, with a small group of elites at the top in control of everything, a rapidly diminishing middle class, and a vastly expanded dependent class. This is what we must fight, because that's not who we are. And that's not how we rose from nowhere to the pinnacle of the world in record time and to a higher pinnacle than anyone has ever risen to. It's because of the kinds of values that we have. And remember, we are different than all other nations of the world because we recognize that our rights come not from the king, not from the government, but from our Creator. And we recognize that there is such a thing as right and wrong.
Yes. Yep.
And, you know, I have a hard time sometimes understanding some people of faith in this country who say it offends my moral sensibilities to have to make a choice between the lesser of two evils. Have you heard that?
Yes.
Now, let me tell you a secret. There is a reason that God gave us a brain.
That's right.
Okay? Because you are deciding between the lesser of evils every single day. When you walk out of the house until you get back in the bed, you're deciding between the lesser of evils because we live in a non-perfect world.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't make decisions, you would be virtually paralyzed. And when you stop and you think about it, you know, I think back to a situation where a beautiful, statuesque young woman who was fully self-sufficient came up to my wife and she said, "You're Dr. Carson's wife, right?" She said, "Your husband operated on me when I was still in my mother's womb." And now, you know what? That's the reason that no one will ever convince me that what is in a mother's womb is a meaningless bunch of science. I don't want to gross anybody out. But if you have ever seen the picture of a baby that is almost full term and a partial birth abortion where the head has been ripped off and arms and legs ripped apart, they use these forceps that have teeth in them that are curved backwards, so when it grabs the tissue, you can't get away from it, and it tear the baby apart inside the womb.
It's awful.
It's murder. It's murder.
You know, Hillary Clinton thinks that that's okay.
She's sick.
Now,
Lock her up.
yeah, lock her up.
Lock her up. Lock her up. Lock her up. Lock her up.
But that is what we are doing. You can't decide between that and somebody who is pro-life? Are you kidding me?
Really?
That is absurd. And, you know, when it comes to so many of the other issues like immigration, you have one person who says, let's secure our borders and let's make Americans first on our priority list.
Yes.
And you have another one who says, I think we should have open borders. And let everybody in here. And let's not have any identity of our own.
Right. Yeah.
And you have a hard time deciding between those? We have a horrible economic situation.
Yep.
They say it's the new norm. There's nothing normal about it.
No.
And they interpret things completely differently. They say, that the progressives say, the economy's doing great. Unemployment is down to 5%, which is the definition of full employment. Well, anybody with half a brain, a quarter of a brain even, would know better than that. You know that we're languishing, but it's the labor force participation rate. The number of people eligible to work who are actually working, it's at a 40-year low. Because they just take the people who are not looking for jobs and don't count them anymore. And unfortunately, there's a large segment of our society that is not well educated, that is not well informed.
It's true.
And you can tell them stuff like that, and they'll say, "Oh, see, what a great job they're doing. Unemployment is, oh, this is so fantastic. Look at all these jobs. They may be chicken jobs that don't pay anything."
Chicken jobs. That's true.
And this is the exact reason
They settle.
that our founders emphasized education so strong.
That's right.
And they said that an educated and informed populace is essential to the maintenance of our lifestyle
Amen.
and our freedom.
That's right.
And the reason they said that is because if the people are uninformed, if the people are easy to lead, all it requires is dishonest politicians and dishonest media to completely fundamentally change the nation that we're in. That's what the sad part is we do have dishonest politicians, and we do have dishonest media, and they are fundamentally changing America, and the only thing that will stop them is us. And what they depend on. Because you see, I got to tell you, the secular progressives, they do not care whether you agree with them or not. It makes not the slightest difference to them, as long as you sit down and keep your mouth shut. The way we get our country back is we stand up and we open our mouths. When I think about how amazing this country is, I think about myself when I was 9 years old, after my parents had gotten divorced and we moved from Detroit to Boston, and I'm sitting there on the ghetto stairs.
Hey, Detroit.
And boarded up windows and doors, sirens and gangs, murders, rats. They had water rats. The first time I saw one, I thought it was a dog. But, as I sat up on the stairs, I was looking through the building across the street. And all the windows were broken out. But the sun was shining through. There was a sunbeam actually shining through the building. And it made me think about my future. And I started thinking, what is my future? 9 years old. And I was thinking that it was not a very good future. Because I'd seen so many horrible things happen. Both of my older cousins that we lived with were killed. I'd seen violence. I'd seen people lying on the street with bullet holes in them. And I remember thinking that I probably will not live to be 20 years old. But fortunately, I had a mother who believed in me. And she was always saying, she was always telling us what we could do, not what we couldn't do. And getting us to believe in ourselves. And eventually, it took hold, it took root. And, there was a little stuff in there, I was not the best kid that you could. But eventually,
That's hard to believe.
through the grace of God,
Yes.
and through the opportunities that are presented in this country, I was able to take advantage of what was available to me. Even when I was in high school, it wasn't the greatest high school, but I was able to go back to the teachers after class because they couldn't teach anything because they spent the whole hour disciplining people. And I would say, what were you planning to teach?
Oh my
And
God.
so delighted that there was somebody who was interested. I got a lot of extra tutoring. You know, I went back to the biology teacher, Mr. McCotter, and he was the consummate nerd, you know, with the big glasses and the high water pants, the squeaky voice. I mean, there was no way they were going to let him teach. I mean, they tormented that guy. But I went back, I said, what were you planning? And he told me, he said, how would you like to be the lab assistant? It was my first paying job. And that way, I would know what was supposed to happen regardless of what happened in the classroom. And then I started setting up all the biology labs, and then later the chemistry labs, and then later the physics labs. And I was able to get the kind of education out of a very poor inner city school in Detroit that allowed me to go on to Yale University. So, you know, but it required hard work, and it required a mother who cared a lot, who didn't have much in the way of education. We, as the American people, need to emphasize the fact that we are all in the same boat. Yeah. And if part of the boat sinks, the rest of it's going out. Yeah. We need to care about each other. And, you know, compassion is built into us, but we have allowed the purveyors of division to come into our land and to drive wedges between us on the basis of gender and race and income and religion and virtually every demographic. And we derive our strength from our unity. That's why we're called the United States of America. And if we the people understand that and we begin to reject the purveyors of the need to be, we need to also recognize that there is nothing wrong with believing in God. And in godly principles of loving your fellow man, caring about your neighbor, developing your God-given talents to the utmost so that you become valuable to the people around you, having values and principles that govern your life. Amen. And when we do that, it kind of takes care of all the other issues that are going on. One of the things you've heard Donald Trump talking about, and he really believes this, we've had many conversations about it, in our inner cities, a lot of those young people are not getting an education because they are going to failing schools. They are stuck in failing schools. School choice is critical. They need to be able to avail themselves and we have to give them the mechanism to exercise that choice through vouchers. And some people say, but that would be expensive. Let me tell you something. It's nowhere near as expensive as not developing our people. That's expensive. And when we have people in the penal system and on the welfare system who could be contributing members to our society, it's a double whammy. Yeah. We're not getting the benefit of them, plus we're paying more. So this is the way that Donald Trump thinks. And that's why I believe that our good Lord has ordained him for a time such as this. Hillary Clinton was criticizing him last week. You remember when he opened the new Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C.? Under budget and ahead of schedule. That's because she doesn't understand those words. That's a foreign language to her. But that's a language that we need to bring back to Washington, D.C. Because, you know, like all of you, I don't mind paying my fair share of taxes. but not to a bunch of people who just waste the resource. Who have no idea what they're doing. So in closing, I just want to say, and we are going to have an opportunity for some autographs and for some pictures with myself and the government, okay? And with candy too. But Thomas Jefferson predicted that we would end up in the situation that we're in right now, because it's part of a natural human cycle. You know, many people have talked about this. You go from slavery to freedom to prosperity to luxury to apathy to dependency back to slavery. And we're on that continuum. But our saving grace is that we have a constitution that was designed to keep the government under control. Because the government's natural tendency is to grow, to metastasize, to infiltrate, and to dominate. But when we are not vigilant, and we don't hold the feet of the government to the fire, then we get a situation where they begin to dominate and control our lives. But Jefferson said, just before we turned into something else, the wise people of America would recognize what they were about to lose. And a grassroots movement would rapidly develop, and the people would retake control of the government. I say now is the time.